Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're jumping right into an incredibly dynamic snapshot of our world on August 16th, 2026. We are weaving together local crises, global standoffs, and absolutely massive technological leaps into one clear narrative. We're looking at a world operating in extremes right now, going from the volatile weather right outside our doors to the trillion-dollar shifts happening in Silicon Valley, all the way to the intense geopolitical chess matches unfolding overseas.
So, we're taking a thematic, macro trends approach to make sense of it all today. First, we'll cover national events and weather, then we'll move into global diplomacy and geopolitics. After that, we'll dive into the accelerating AI economy, check in on markets and human health, and finally, wrap up with sports, entertainment, and culture.
All right, Section 1, National Events and Weather, the Elements in Extremes.
We're starting at the local level today, and the regional contrasts across the country are just staggering. In Indiana, communities are battling their worst flooding in 30 years. It is a devastating situation. 6 tragic deaths and massive infrastructure strain, with 172,000 NiSource customers losing power. Meanwhile, way out in the Pacific, Hawaii is taking a serious battering from Tropical Storm Lala. It struck the Big Island as a Category 1 hurricane, damaging over 100 homes, and they are looking at a jaw-dropping forecast of 35 inches of rain for higher elevations. And down south, Dallas and the broader DFW region are just baking under a relentless heat dome, with highs hitting 102 and the heat index blowing past 105 degrees. It's a very real reminder of just how volatile the elements are right now.
Now, shifting from natural elements to human impact, we have a major update on the Luigi Mangione case. If we trace this back from the initial shock of the United Healthcare CEO shooting in December 2024 to this past Friday, Mangione has actually pleaded guilty to a federal stalking charge. Now, because there is no plea deal in place here, the judge holds complete sentencing discretion, which likely points to a life sentence. At the exact same time, his state murder trial is being heavily contested over double jeopardy grounds, meaning his defense is arguing he simply can't be tried twice for the same underlying crime. It's an incredibly complex legal web that is finally hitting a critical inflection point.
Moving right along to Section 2, Global Diplomacy and Geopolitics, the Global Chessboard. On the Gaza diplomacy front, we are looking at a really stark divide right now regarding the Phase 2 disarmament roadmap. On one side, Hamas recently signaled acceptance of the Trump administration's 15-point plan, and this happened following a rare meeting in Cairo between U.S. envoy Jared Kushner and Hamas leadership. But directly countering that, Prime Minister Netanyahu outright rejected this exact same roadmap last week. Meanwhile, military operations and airstrikes are actively continuing in Khan Yunis and Nuseirat. We are objectively tracking a highly fragile situation here where international diplomatic efforts are actively colliding with the ongoing realities on the ground.
And the geopolitical pressure cooker is definitely heating up elsewhere too. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is signaling that new U.S. economic sanctions against Iran could be rolled out as early as next week. This is happening while broader U.S.-Iran negotiations remain completely stalled out, so it shows a distinct pivot toward applying heavier economic leverage in the region.
Looking back over the past half-decade in Afghanistan, Sunday actually marks exactly 5 years since the Taliban retook Kabul. It's a grim milestone. Now, the international community rightfully focuses heavily on the total ban on girls' education, but new analysis highlights that the educational crisis has deepened significantly for boys as well. This is driven by a strict shift towards religious curricula that severely disrupted standard schooling across the board. We did get a small glimmer of diplomatic movement with the recent release of detained American missionary Kevin Rideout, but the systemic, day-to-day domestic issues in the country remain incredibly severe.
Okay, let's turn to Section 3. The accelerating AI economy, the technological revolution.
With all the major shifts and massive capital raises we saw in the tech sector this week, we really have to pause and ask ourselves, is the AI bubble bursting, or are we just witnessing the beginning of its true expansion? Let's take a look at the data.
$11.5 billion. That is Anthropic's preliminary Q2 revenue. To really put that into perspective, that is a 14-fold increase year over year. They're now posting positive adjusted operating income for the very first time, and they're rapidly accelerating their fall IPO roadshow. I mean, numbers like this strongly suggest that, at least for the top-tier players, the expansion phase is very much alive and monetizing. But what's truly fascinating is the fierce rivalry happening behind the scenes of all that massive growth. OpenAI actually used the phrase rotten to its core in a recent motion to dismiss Apple's trade secrets lawsuit. OpenAI is essentially accusing Apple of using litigation as a smokescreen just to hide their own stalled AI development. And the crucial data point backing this up, over 400 former Apple employees have already jumped ship to work at OpenAI. It's a massive talent drain that just highlights exactly how hyper-competitive the AI engineering landscape has become right now.
And look, this AI acceleration isn't just happening in software or chatbots. DARPA just successfully completed the first real-world F-16 flight completely piloted by AI. No human on the stick. It definitely gives you a little bit of Skynet anxiety, right? But it opens up entirely new debates about autonomous decision-making in combat. Over on the hardware side, Intel just closed a $23 billion equity sale, pricing above their offer at $102.50 a share. They are stockpiling cash to fund a massive $20 billion plus foundry expansion in 2026. Because software needs chips, and chips, well, they need foundries.
That brings us to Section 4, Markets and Human Health, Breakthroughs and Investments.
So how do these sweeping technological shifts impact the global markets? Well, Goldman Sachs estimates an absolute staggering $1.019 trillion in global AI capital spending for 2026. Over $1 trillion. The U.S. alone accounts for $581 billion of that, which is roughly 1.8% of the entire U.S. GDP. However, you should know it's not without risk. Morgan Stanley is actively warning that AI-related debt is pricing at wider spreads. That basically means investors are starting to view these massive AI loans as increasingly risky, signaling some underlying market caution despite those monumental figures.
Beyond just AI, we saw a general easing of July CPI inflation that is actively supporting equity rallies across the board. Riding that wave of market confidence, Berkshire Hathaway doubled down on tech, adding a whopping $17 billion to their Alphabet stake under CEO Greg Abel. And shifting gears from traditional stocks over to crypto, the Trump-backed firm World Liberty Financial just secured a conditional bank charter. That marks a really significant regulatory milestone for digital assets.
Now let's see how all this builds into our everyday physical well-being. Because when you juxtapose those trillion-dollar tech numbers with human health, we actually have some incredibly impactful, highly accessible medical breakthroughs this week. First up, studies are showing that midlife exercise and blood sugar control dramatically slow cognitive decline, with researchers noting especially strong protective effects in Mexican-American adults. Second, a centuries-old medication called low-dose digoxin, which, by the way, costs less than 10 cents a day, has been found to reduce heart failure hospitalizations by a massive 25%. And finally, crucial new research shows that COVID-19 actually reactivates dormant viruses, like Epstein-Barr, which is closely linked to long COVID disabilities. This is huge because it gives scientists brand new therapeutic targets to potentially help millions of people.
All right, let's come back down to earth for our final section: sports, entertainment, and culture. The cultural wrap-up.
Over in the sports world, history was officially made at UFC 330. Islam Makhachev broke Anderson Silva's all-time UFC win streak record with an absolutely unbelievable victory, while Mackenzie Dern successfully defended her title. Meanwhile, on the gridiron, the NFL preseason has officially roared back to life. We saw the Ravens, Cowboys, and Rams secure Week 1 wins. A definite standout moment was Ravens rookie Jacoby Lane snagging a touchdown, just continuing his incredible training camp performance. Looking at the entertainment sector, here is a number Hollywood executives are absolutely celebrating today: $2 billion. Spider-Man Brand New Day just swung past the $2 billion mark globally, making it Sony's highest-grossing release ever. This massive hit has pushed the 2026 domestic box office to $6.2 billion, pacing 15% ahead of last year's post-pandemic recovery. It's safe to say the theatrical experience is clearly fighting back.
But behind those massive box office numbers, the actual business of Hollywood is incredibly tense right now. The ongoing Paramount-Warner Bros. Discovery merger is raising some serious eyebrows. Theater owners are terrified that a merged mega studio is going to drastically reduce the number of movies hitting screens. Now, Paramount Skydance CEO David Ellison is actively pledging to deliver 30 films a year. But rivals are heavily questioning how he can possibly maintain that kind of creative volume while simultaneously gutting $6 billion in corporate costs. It's a huge question mark.
So how does this all tie together as we look ahead? Well, here is exactly what you need to be watching this coming Monday.
First, in diplomacy, Jared Kushner is taking that Gaza Phase 2 roadmap directly to Jerusalem for a high-stakes meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Second, on the national front, Indiana will officially begin formal damage assessments to recover from those historic, tragic floods. And third, Wall Street will be fiercely tracking Anthropic's IPO momentum and watching closely how Intel deploys that massive $23 billion war chest.
With so many intersecting forces reshaping our world at literal breakneck speed, from trillion-dollar global AI infrastructure and autonomous fighter jets, all the way down to a 10-cent heart medication that saves lives, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder as you step into next week. Are we collectively adapting to this unprecedented, accelerating pace of change, or are we all just simply trying to keep up? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you next time.